We are so excited to be here today. Taylor, how do you think Coalesce has been going so far? I wouldn't have imagined that we'd be talking about Renaissance art at a data conference, but I'm here for it.
Yeah, no, it's really good. I'm excited to see what everybody else says. I went back and watched some of the recordings, and so super glad they're all recorded for those of us who couldn't attend live. And it was really exciting to hear this talk kind of name drop. So I'm excited to share our thoughts with the community.
Yeah, absolutely. And the DBT community has been really crucial for the two of us. It's excited to be a part of it and to be able to give back. People who may not know this, but I ended up working with you at GitLab through the DBT community. So we want to encourage people be involved in the community, especially during this talk. Chime in on Slack. We're really excited to hop in and talk to people. So with that, are you ready to get started?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, let's do it. Taylor and I are here today to talk to you a little bit about how to run your data team as a product team. With that, a bit about me. So my name is Emily Sherio. I'm a senior engineering manager for data and BI at Netlify, which is a lot of words to say head of data. Oh, it seems we're having some technical difficulties. So I'm gonna try sharing my screen. View present. Oh, that's not doing it either, huh? You present. Nope. All right, let's try this one more time, folks. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. We are doing this live, so of course there are going to be some technical hiccups. And Taylor, no. File. You present. There we go. Now we've got it. That is what it is to work remotely. And Taylor and I are big champions of remote work, and you deal with the technical hiccups as they come. So thanks for your patience. Like I was saying, my name is Emily Sherio. I do data things at Netlify. My pronouns are she and her. And fun fact about me, I was person number 52 in DBT Slack back in 2016. Like I said, DBT Slack has been a huge part of my career development and my career growth. It's how I ended up getting to know and meet Taylor. And I am so honored to be able to give this presentation with my esteemed colleague today. So Taylor, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I'm a staff data engineer at GitLab. I've been at GitLab for almost 3 years at this point. I led the data team for about a year. Emily was actually the first data analyst hire, and she's clearly since gone on to bigger and better things, which is, as a manager, is one of the best things you can see, is to have your direct reports grow beyond even your own capabilities. So my fun fact, I was actually number 320 in Slack back in 2018. So not as cool as Emily, but still kind of cool. And then you definitely don't want to follow me on Twitter. That'll be a mistake for everyone. So let's just hop into it. Data teams are product teams. This is kind of our big, bold statement, and something that we're trying to get feedback on. And this isn't the declarative, definitive statement of the way the world necessarily should be, but we think it's an idea and we want a lot of feedback. But based on our experiences, a lot of conversations in the community, and frankly, a lot of based on the talks that we've seen so far at Coalesce between Tristan's and Drew's as well, people are thinking about how to organize and run data teams and what it means to be like a large data team. So we think having this mental model of running your data team like a product team is a model that's going to unlock huge potential for you as a data leader, but also for your business that within the context that you operate. So to get us started, Emily's going to kind of share some background on kind of like what the purpose of a data team is, and then we'll dive into specifics of what this actually means.
Thanks, Taylor. So let's start right there. What is the purpose of your data team? Take a second here, think about an answer. Okay, got it? The purpose of your data team is to help your organization make better decisions. And hopefully that's a variation of what you came up with in your head. This is our mission statement on the data team at Netlify. The data team exists to empower the entire organization to make the best decisions possible by providing accurate, timely, and useful insights. We don't exist to make dashboards. We don't exist to just answer other people's questions. We exist to empower the organization to make the best decisions possible. But data teams are struggling with this right now. We're a bit overwhelmed by the number of asks, and we're getting good questions. Where are our new users coming from? What does adoption of this new feature look like? Where should we be spending our marketing dollars? It feels a bit like this Harry Potter scene where there are more letters coming at you or more asks coming at you that you can possibly grab onto. And it really sucks because people don't trust the work that the data team is doing. Right now, 1 in 3 leaders and executives say they do not trust the data they use to make decisions. And that's from IBM and KPMG. And 50% of knowledge workers' time is spent hunting for data, finding and correcting errors, and looking for corollary data sources to numbers that they don't trust. Just right there, just that 50%. If we could improve the trust that people had in data teams, we could drastically increase the productivity of our organizations. And really what it comes from is that data teams are stuck in this vicious cycle. I'm going to talk through this, and if we were sitting in a room, I'm sure I'd see a bunch of heads bobbing. Because the way it works is teams rush to put out an analysis because there are so many asks. Then the stakeholder questions the analysis. So now they have to go prove the numbers, walk people through the logic, really go back and redo the work they've already done. They don't get to new work because they're now in this backlog of proving numbers and existing technical debt. And so when they get to that next analysis, they rush through it again. And I can only call this the cycle of sadness because it is a sad reality. And when we think about what is going on here, why are we stuck in this cycle? It's because data teams are seen as service organizations. A question comes in and an answer goes out, kind of like a handoff. This is like IT organizations. You submit a ticket when your laptop's broken or you can't get into your email. But this is a problem because it positions your data team as a reactive organization instead of a proactive partner. And in this model, data teams aren't creating insights, they're just answering questions for others. But that's not the goal of the data team, right? What is the goal of the data team again? To empower the entire organization to make the best decisions possible. The service model is all wrong if what we're talking about is providing insights. If we spend all of our time answering questions, we'll never create the space for our team members to be able to effectively deliver insights. Think of this as the old trope of an engineer who is stuck in meetings all day, so they never have time to code. If we define the team based on the insights we deliver, if this is our metric for success, we need to be focused on doing exactly that, not just answering questions. This doesn't mean we throw the service model out the window. Instead of building data teams as service organizations, what we need to do is reframe our work as building a data product that enables the business to make better decisions. Now I'm going to pause right here because I'm talking about data as a product and data as a service. And there's a well-shared blog post by Justin Gage where he talks about data as a product and data as a service. I am not using those terms in the same way. What I'm talking about when I say data as a product is this IT model of request comes in, answer goes out. And when we talk about data as a product, we mean something different. So Taylor, why don't you tell us a little bit more about what we mean by your data product?
Absolutely. So like Emily said, what exactly is the data product? Next slide. Just about everything. So what we're proposing here really kind of dramatically increases the purview of what a data team is thinking about, caring about, and frankly has some control over. What is the data product? So every piece of data that is flowing between people, systems, and processes is part of this data product. Every analysis that the data team is producing and every tool that has some sort of analytic capability is part of the data product. So think of a tool like Zendesk or Salesforce, which has built-in analytics capabilities. Every spreadsheet, Google Sheet, Excel sheet, CSV, these are part of your data product. These are all, think of these as features, are part of the broader feature set of your data product. Next slide. And the bigger, simpler way to say this is if people are using it to make decisions within your company, it's part of the data product. Remember, the goal of the data team is to help the company make better decisions. And so if people are using something to make a decision, you should consider it to be part of the data product. But along with this, you should also think about like what isn't the data product. It's not a single tool or piece of software. So there's not one thing in the organization that you can point to and say, this is our data product. We can spin this off and sell it as a separate piece of software if we wanted to. It's going to be a complex thing. It's also not just the things that the data team procures or manages. So the data warehouse, your BI tool, we think these are part of the data product, but they're not the entire thing. Similarly, the data platform is not the entire product. It is just a part of it. And so it's a big mental shift to go from, hey, I think about this small world to thinking about this larger world. It's also not the other myriad jobs that are being done within the organization. If your sales team is having a conversation with the customer, that's not part of the data product, but maybe some of the data that's coming out of it that they then might use to iterate on how they're approaching these conversations, that might be part of the data product. So it's not everything in the organization, but it's certainly a lot of parts of the organization. So why are we framing it as a product? Emily and I have come to believe, based on a lot of reading and conversations and experiences within different companies, that good companies are product-focused companies. If you think about it from the perspective of a startup, startups are trying to find product market fit. When we joined GitLab, less than 500 people, product market fit was kind of there, and now we're kind of in a growth stage. I think about companies like Tesla or Apple or Snowflake, where they have a great product and a great product experience, and they're very much focused on that product and the problems that it solves for the customers. So it's a good mental model that centers the customer, and the interface between the business and the customer is around the product. Another reason we want to frame it like this is that product teams have a large and multidisciplinary skill set embodied in a bunch of different people. So product managers, UX researchers, designers, engineers, technical writers, and more are all focused on solving customer problems. And also there should be a vision and a strategy on where the product is going. And if product teams do all of this well, they're going to be driving revenue and good business outcomes. And in the case of a for-profit company, this is increasing revenue and increasing profits. But we think this is applicable to NGOs, nonprofit organizations. You just kind of tweak your good business outcome metric. Cha-ching. And so we want all of that same goodness for data teams. We want data teams to have a clear vision and strategy. We think data teams need to have this deep understanding of their customers, which in this case are going to be your coworkers. Data teams will be able to have a large, excellent team with a variety of skills. And it also reframes the work that the data team is doing as iteration on a feature set instead of just this service model that Emily talked about. And remember, all of this is to empower the company to make better decisions across the board. That's what this is in service of. So next slide. Your job as a data leader is to help guide the strategy and feature set of the data product. So what's actually needed? Like, this all sounds pretty good, but what do you actually need to think about just to start implementing to run your data team like a product team? Well, first, it's going to start with a huge mental shift. And I've said this kind of multiple times already, but this is a complete reframing of how data teams typically operate. You are, in this model, as a data leader, you are building a complicated product. It's large, it's complex, and it's constantly growing, and it's growing kind of outside of your control in a lot of cases. It's going to span the entire organization. So every database, data flow, tool that people are using to make decisions, these are now part of your product. And this is exciting. It dramatically increases the purview of what the data team is kind of in control of and is able to influence, but it requires that mental shift for you to kind of even begin to wrap your arms around it. And along with this, you have to think about all of the features that are now part of your data product. The warehouse, spreadsheets, BI tools, these built-in SaaS analytic capabilities. These are now all features of the product, and you as a data leader need to have a good mental model of the product. And better yet, it should be documented and discoverable. This is a living product, and so you need basically a living document and a living mental model to keep up with all of this. It also requires a multidisciplinary group of people, as I mentioned before. So product teams have all of these wonderful roles, and we think data teams can have very similar roles as well. So let's jump into some of those. Yeah. So your multidisciplinary data team is going to include, at the start, a data product manager. So in a lot of smaller organizations, especially if you're a team of one, this is probably going to be the role that you fulfill the most, along with kind of all these other roles, frankly. But a data product manager is going to be somebody who helps set the vision of where the data product is going. Importantly, you're going to be meeting with your customers, your coworkers, to understand their pain points. And you're also going to be setting the prioritization of product development within the organization. Are you going to answer this, specific analytic question, or are you going to build out some testing within DBT? The data product manager is going to help set those priorities, along with probably an engineering manager as well. We also think there's room for a data UX researcher. This is going to be somebody who really understands where the data is in the organization, and also how your customers or coworkers are interfacing it with it. They should understand the full data lifecycle of how data is moving through these different tools and throughout the organization. How does the sales, SDR input data into Salesforce? How does that materialize in Snowflake? They should kind of understand this whole network and understand where the pain points are that people are struggling to interface and gain insights from the data. We think there's going to be a lot of training and enablement with this role. Think along the lines of do people need SQL training? Do they need a self-service dashboard? They need to understand just what the experience is like for your coworkers to interface with this data and work on making it better. Now, critical for this conference, of course, are analytics engineers. We think these are your data designers. They're the people who are going to make the meaningful, reusable abstractions that exist in your data warehouse. But critically, it needs to be based on an understanding of what questions people are having and what pain points you're trying to solve. So there is an element of potentially customer interfacing here. They need to be able to understand what questions people have, but we feel this will be a very collaborative role within the data team. Next slide. A few more roles here. So data engineers, I'm a little biased. I think we're absolutely essential for the data teams, but there's definitely still a role for data engineers within the product-focused data team. These are going to be the people that help design and build the data flows to move data around the company. But more importantly, I think they're going to be essential for helping set standards across the organization of data quality. There will be, we think, some sort of element of customer support along with this role in terms of working with system owners to improve data quality upstream, and also helping them understand how that manifests downstream. Data analysts are an essential part of the product-focused data team. These people are going to act as the frontline support for the organization. This is kind of the data as a service model. These folks are going to be very generally reactive in nature. They're going to respond to people's questions and help point them in the right direction. But critically, we think this role is also going to be very important to help understand what should be built within the data product, what abstractions are needed. And also they're going to be the first to hear what questions people are having or are about to have, and can work with the rest of the data team to prioritize those features within the data product. And lastly, we have, previous slide. Lastly, we have the data business partners. A lot of different companies call these people different titles: decision science analysts, decision scientists, maybe data scientists. But the key framing on this is that these people are going to be proactively focused on new decision capabilities. They should be generally highly technical and able to float between different parts of the organization to discover new data insights. Now, somebody would call us out if we didn't mention something about machine learning. We're not throwing that aside. We just think that it's generally, as your capabilities expand, you'll start to move into machine learning. But certainly you need to frame the capabilities that machine learning brings within this product lens. Is it going to solve a problem? Is it going to help people make decisions? And you'll have more roles, certainly, if you're implementing machine learning, but make sure it's going to solve a real problem before you just start throwing machine learning at your data stack. Next slide. So what else do you need to run your data team as a product team? Well, you need exec level support. And we think the data team should have their own C-suite level executive, whether this is a chief data officer or chief analytics officer. That's kind of up in the air. But having this C-suite representation is essential, we believe, for a very cross-functional focus of the data team. By having your own part of the organization, you're clearly communicating to the organization, hey, we work for everybody. We're not biased towards any one organization. Another point why we think it's important is it creates a really clear opportunity for career growth for everybody on the team. If you come in as a data analyst, you have a clear window into different roles that you can move into. Maybe you're interested in the data product manager. Maybe you're interested in that C-suite level position. You can understand what that growth opportunity looks like. The last point here is we think it's important for having that centralized set of standards and general scope for the data team. By being a separate organization, again, you're serving the whole org and you can kind of set standards for the whole organization. If the C-suite, your own C-suite isn't an option, do consider engineering as a good alternative. Engineering is typically going to be, they're going to have experience serving the rest of the org. They're going to be more technical, having probably built service tools for internal use cases. Also check out David Murray's talk on structuring data teams as well. Next slide. So along with the C-suite exec, your data team is also going to require resources. And that's part of the reason also having the C-suite level representation is important, because this is going to require some funding and also some headcount. On the headcount side, we typically would recommend anywhere from 3 to 10% of the company should be focused on data and decision making. Toward that upper end, probably if your company's product is very data focused, and maybe towards the lower end if not. This is one thing that when I was a manager, I didn't do as well, is kind of keep the headcount growing with the rest of the organization. And because I hired awesome people like Emily and we were using great tools like DBT, it's enabled us to keep up with the needs of the organization. But man, it would be great if we had more people. And I think if I'd done a better job then. On the funding side, we don't have a ton of strong recommendations here, but we do recommend that you experiment with it. You could have other organizations fund different people within your org. Maybe sales pays for 2 analysts, or finance is doing the same. One thing we did want to mention is the hex.tech blog post on data team ROI. The best way to get funding is to really have other people toot your own horn, as it was, and have them share why what you're doing is so valuable. Maybe there's a world where instead of buying a $100,000 software license, that money goes towards the data team to enable decision-making capabilities. And then one more point that I want to make here, and I think this is the most critical, and actually listening to Tristan's talk and Drew's talk, I think is probably the most essential part of this, is this model, and really any model, but the product model in particular is going to require a lot of proactive communication. You're going to have to talk to a lot of people. In a small organization, less than 200 people, you should probably talk to everybody. In large organizations, you need to be a little bit more selective with your time, but talking to people is going to be critical. And what are you talking to them about? It's not just the weather and their kids. You need to help them understand the strategy of what the data team is trying to do. One thing we foresee, and Emily will get into this in just a little bit, is you will probably get pushback on this model, but also you're going to get pushback when you have to prioritize one thing in front of another in terms of feature development. And so you need to be able to have that conversation about why you're choosing this over that. Also, you need to hear their pain points. People like to be heard, and you need to create space for them to share the frustrations that they're having, and do help them get solved, even in some minor way. Even if it's just, hey, make an issue, we know about this, and this is how we're thinking about prioritizing this work. The key thing here, I think, is there needs to be an outward flow of information. So creating documentation is a great way to have that outward flow. Emily and I come from that GitLab background, which has our handbook philosophy, and creating those artifacts for other people to read and consume has been very beneficial in terms of scaling your time and communicating information outwards. So next slide. This all sounds like great. I'm painting like a really nice picture, but how do you actually go about starting to implement that? And that sounds like a hard question, so I'm going to pass it off to Emily to answer that.
No pressure, am I right? Really, you want to start by looking around the room and looking and understanding what product teams are doing. We start with user stories. So as a stakeholder, I want to get this thing done because I'm trying to accomplish this task. We really need to be framing the problems that data teams are solving in the same way. The first thing you want to do here is stop getting asks for bar charts or line charts or pie charts or whatever it might be. Instead, spend time working and pairing with your question asker, trying to understand what their desired result is. There's that great Henry Ford quote that if I had asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. And that's what we're seeing. People are asking for a bar chart, but they come back because they realize that's not actually what they needed to accomplish. So what we want to do is start there. Understand the problem. What is it we're trying to solve? Your team, the data team, is not just widget builders. They don't build just off specs. You're problem solvers. So start by understanding the problem. I posted this tweet over the weekend going back and forth with actually a great number of members of the DBT community that all I want for Christmas is for people to stop asking for charts and start asking for help solving the problem and letting the data team be the business partners we know they can be. And of course, a Twitter edit button. If you know someone, let me know. We need to start by defining success for the team. So if the value of the data team is a function of the number and the volume of the decisions you're enabling, it's not a function of the number of the amount of data you have or the dashboards you've built, right? If you can have all the data in the whole company inside of your data warehouse, but if no one's consuming it to make effective decisions, your team is not being effective. The same is true of dashboards. If you build every dashboard and answer every ticket, but no one is consuming those to make impactful decisions, your team is not being effective. So instead of measuring your success based on these output productivity metrics, focus on the business impact you're having. One example that we've heard a lot is considering measuring NPS for overall satisfaction with your team, or just a simple, how do you feel about the data team sort of survey. Another option though is, Taylor mentioned that Hex blog post. If you think about the work your team is doing and you are having an impact on the business, people are going to ask you what the ROI of your team is a little bit less because you'll have champions throughout the business. And that's really where you would like to be. If you're not there today, that's okay. But slowly you can work there by focusing on the kind of work the kind of decisions you're enabling. And think about everything that you produce, including every analysis, as part of this bigger product that your company is using to make their decisions. This model is not perfect though, and it actually introduces some new problems. If you've listened to talks from earlier today, you've heard some of this as a theme. Drew actually covered data discovery and how that's going to be a really important part of this next phase of data teams. In a world where it's really about using data to make decisions, data discovery becomes more important, kind of like a feature discovery in a product. If every feature that a team rolls out is buried under a menu somewhere and it never gets used, well, it wasn't useful. The same is true with data analyses. If you build analyses and they live in the cupboard and nobody finds them, well, they didn't matter. Data literacy is also going to be a big problem here. So if you have a chart, my handy dandy whiteboard, if you have a chart, your week over week metric at the bottom, some number you're tracking here, and it looks like this, you come into work this morning and it looks like that. And you get a ping, oh no, Emily, my dashboard's broken. What do we do? Something's wrong with the data. It's Wednesday. How can you compare your midweek number to a completed week? And this is something that every data team has faced. Data literacy is going to be more important to the business as we teach people how, in order for us to get people to adopt data. So teach new people how to use and leverage your data product. This is part of the new structure you'll need to be effective. And the third problem that we'll need to consider how to solve is trying to serve the right market. Much like a software product needs to focus on solving a particular use case for users before it expands into the next segment, the data team too cannot serve everyone from the beginning. So focus on a function in the business or two and serve those well before you expand to others. You'll need to get executive buy-in like Taylor talked about, but these will make you more effective. And be prepared for pushback. No new ideas are welcomed with open arms right away. Proactively communicate with the organization. Like Taylor said, communication should be flowing out from your team. Document everything. Put it in writing. Share with people how you're working. How do you think about it? What are you prioritizing? How are you prioritizing? give your team visibility into what you're doing. And finally, consider having data team office hours. Jacob gave a great talk yesterday where he called them data clinics. And this is a great way to think about prioritization. Taylor and I have had mixed experiences with these where they maybe weren't that effective. It's okay to give this a try, work on it for a couple months. If it doesn't work for your organization, for your data product that you're building, well, throw it out the window and leave the idea there, or come back to it in 6 months. Just like when you build a product, we have to iterate. So put something out there, get feedback on it, and then do it again. Now, we've talked about, Taylor, what this idea is. We've talked about what it looks like in practice. We've talked about how to implement it, but there's a lot of people on this call today. What can people do differently if they come into work when they go into work tomorrow?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it can be, what we're talking about is a really large scope, and can be and is frankly kind of overwhelming, especially if you're part of a 1 or 2 person team and you're like, how the heck am I actually going to get this started in my organization? Maybe you don't have that representation at the executive level. So we've got a couple of ideas, but I'm sure folks in the Slack channel will add some more. So starting tomorrow, book a coffee chat with a product manager in your organization to understand more about how they work. If you don't have one, ping somebody in the DPT Slack community. I'm sure Simon will talk to everybody about how product managers work and how their brains work. That's a good conversation to get started, just to understand that mindset that they're in. Start responding to requests for specific charts with more questions to them, but trying to understand the underlying problem. People are going to come with you and say, hey, I need this line chart for MQLs over time or whatever. And maybe that's true. Maybe they do know exactly what they need, but ask questions like, what are you trying to solve? What decision are you trying to make with this? And start small. Don't give them, force them to write an essay right out of the gate, but start that conversation and show like, hey, we're going to take a collaborative approach to this. We're not just going to do exactly what you want us to do every single time. And then the last point here is to start taking inventory of the existing parts of your data stack or your data product. These are parts of your data product within this mental model. And just building your own awareness as a data leader about what exists within your organization will be critical to help you see where people are making decisions, where you can start to focus, and start documenting this. Create, whether it's, if you have like a static site like GitLab does, put it in there. Or if you're using Confluence or whatever you're using, start documenting this, start understanding and building out your mental model of what your data product actually looks like. So hopefully those are some like key takeaways that you can start doing tomorrow in adoption of this mental framework. So that's all we really have. We would love to hear what people think. Again, this isn't the end all be all. We want this to be a conversation. We like this model. We think it gives data teams a lot more importance and value within the organization and helps them live up to their standards. But I don't think Emily and I have fully implemented this, and we're looking for feedback on how to really stress test this idea and make it even better. We are working on a blog post, not sure where it's going to be published, but would love to incorporate feedback from the community onto this idea. And so with that, I think we do have a couple of questions.
Erica, tell us what's been going on in the chat.
Oh my gosh, y'all, it's been so active here. A lot of people having some great commentary and really great questions. So let's just start off with Michael Irvine asks, how do you think about running data as a product team for smaller teams? My team is not going to have 6+ members anytime soon, let alone 6+ roles.
Oh, this is a great question. Michael, you'll hear me say this a lot, but let's look at other organizations that have this problem and see how they solve it, right? And the answer here is, let's look at small product teams and see how they do it. They don't have 6 roles when you kick off a new software company, right? They have people who do double duty. And the answer is that data teams will have the same thing. Your data product manager might also be your UX researcher. That data analyst and the data business partner might be that same one role, but they're covering all of these different responsibilities. So the roles that people are playing in this model is not a direct mapping to specific headcount. It's really about making sure that these responsibilities and these Yeah, responsibilities is the best word. These responsibilities are covered by the work people are doing. The other, sorry, Taylor.
Yeah, I was gonna cut you off there. I would say as a manager and having led a data team as well, and you're in the same boat, Emily, of course, this framework kind of forces you to think about long-term, like, okay, assuming the organization is going to do well and assuming the data team is going to continue to grow, these are potential separate jobs or roles that can be spun out and I can hire people for. So, if you're a data team of one, you're going to do all of these, but you can start thinking about like, okay, I'm a better product manager than I am a data UX researcher. And so I need to hire somebody for this role because that's not my strong suit. So you can kind of think about it in terms of like delegation of jobs to be done.
Yeah, you also, like all work, you have to prioritize what's most important. So you may not, in those initial stages, do the UX research style work where you're understanding what other people are doing in your organization to the depth that you would like to. If that doesn't make the cut list, that doesn't make the cut list. But as your data team or your data organization grows, we're saying these are kind of the full spectrum of what you need to really hit peak data team.
All right. And then we obviously have to ask Tristan's question, and it's a little bit lengthy, so hold on for a second. I often see the data as product/service decisions made based on the relationship of the executive leadership of a company to the data org in the early days. And they often don't even know they're making such a weighty strategic decision. I've also found that it's very hard to change this decision after the fact. The question is, has anyone managed to build executive consensus around changing this model once the team is already up and running? How did you do that?
Great question. I pose it to the community, like, folks, what are your experiences? We would love to hear that. I think what Tristan's saying, like the data team usually falls under the executive that lobbied for investment in the data team. Taylor, have you seen the same?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think, we haven't implemented this model at GitLab, though we do have some great execs that are open-minded to this sort of stuff. To Tristan's point, I think it is hard to change the organization from within, but it's not impossible. But it is a kind of, frankly, a question of power. And does the data team have the power to make these adjustments? And so I think this mental model, this product focus model helps frame those conversations in a way like, look, like you being the executive team, the company are making decisions, and a good data team can make everybody better. And that can help kind of shift that balance of understanding so that data team can gain more resources. But this is also why like people start their own companies so they can, do things the way they think they should be done. So maybe that's something Emily and I will do one day.
And, if we don't start having these conversations now, if we don't start lobbying for C-level data presence, then we're never going to see this, right? These things are never going to happen. If you look at the organizations where we see great data first adoption, I like to talk about data running through their lifeblood. Those are companies where almost always the founder previously had an experience with data and they brought it with them and they prioritized data because they knew how impactful it was. I think now what we're seeing is data leadership that has come up through data, and where that's true, we're seeing more impactful data teams. Where there are more impactful data teams, we're going to see more interest and investment in data. So there's a cycle that starts, and maybe pieces of this seem a little idealistic, but if we don't start pushing and making the case for this now, we're never going to build out that ideal function.
Yeah, and one thing I didn't mention in the talk, even though I had a note to mention it, we would point right now to Stitch Fix probably in terms of information that's out there publicly about companies who have this executive level representation, and they have a lot of good blog posts on their organization as well. So you should check that out.
So I wish that we could extend this conversation for like a few more hours, but unfortunately we're a little bit out of time. But thank you, Taylor and Emily, for an awesome presentation.